My name is Jade Beckles, and I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Advisor here at GS. In collaboration with our senior leadership team, I focus on positioning GS as a leader in diversity and inclusion, innovation, driving meaningful change within the organisations among our public sector clients. Thank you for joining us for our first episode of Leadership Lens, which is a vlog series dedicated to exploring pertinent challenges and perspectives on diversity and inclusion within the public and not for profit sectors and within recruitment. So each episode will bring to light different aspects of D&I, offering insights from various sector leaders and experts. And our goal is very much to provoke thought, encourage conversation, and share practical strategies for fostering inclusive recruitment and inclusive environments, especially within the public sector. And I really want to challenge perceptions, highlight innovative approaches, share best practice, and share stories as well to inspire that kind of meaningful change. So I've introduced myself. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah. Hi, Jade. I'm Michelle Atkinson. I'm one of the principal consultants here, and I work within executive search.
Fantastic. So I'll start off with our conversation topic for this episode, which is the rules of engagement. So, what does that mean to you, Michelle?
Yeah. Well, I think when we first talked about this, and given this is the first in your series, I thought it made sense perhaps to start at the beginning of a process, and I'm thinking about an appointment process. And actually, and the precursor to what we're about to discuss is that accepting that all sectors, organisations, roles are really different and it's really nuanced. And what we're doing is talking really generally, but perhaps some sort of things that myself and my colleagues see or we become aware of that may be slightly different for the obvious parts when we think about diversity. So a lot of our clients now are really good around we need to make a diverse appointment. Let's look at the advert, make sure the person spec's right. Does the material, the advertising material look good? Have we got the panels right? Is the diversity? And so some of these kind of real structural things in a process that help the outcome, organisations are getting really good at, and there's lots of things that we can do to help and advise. I think what we've started to witness a bit of is some of perhaps the informal aspects of a process, and perhaps if you've got
The
this great
unwritten
process in
rules.
place, exactly, and almost, there's some rules of engagement that perhaps have remained the same without people realising, even if the processes are starting to look a bit different.
Ah,
Um,
right.
and it was that I thought perhaps we can talk about today.
So what is it then that you've sort of noticed? Give us an
Mhm.
example.
Yeah. So when we approach candidates and start to have conversations, and often it's headhunting, so people are minding their own business, they're not necessarily looking for a new job, they're happy where they are, and we'll identify them as someone who might be interested in an opportunity, one of the roles that we're working on. Now, when we get to that start point, there's lots of questions from candidates, and it's so subtle, but I think I've become really aware of it recently. If those first questions are around salary, there's almost like an instant aversion of, well, is this person interested for the right reason?
Mm,
And some of this, I think, is definitely linked to where we work. We're in the public sector. There's the Northern Principles. Sort of, it's
yeah,
not traditionally a sector that's associated with financial gain. So I
there
think,
needs to be the passion there.
yeah, the
Mm,
topic of money is uncomfortable for lots of reasons, but I think actually I've started to question recently around, well, why are we so averse to that question? And there's probably some real serious factors behind that I think it's just helpful to be mindful of. So that, it's a small question, but it can have a big impact. And actually,
yeah,
if you haven't come from generational wealth, if you haven't, sort of grown up in an environment where you're worried about money, or you've got some practicalities at home that, yeah, you might be very, sort of career minded, very committed to public service, but there's just some realities of everyone's got bills to pay. Sort of, why do we think that sort of as any indication anyway, someone's sort of motivation and passion for a role?
yeah. And that's the link to diversity there, isn't it? Because as you've said, that people have either a lower social economic background or potentially have grown up and have come from a lower socio-economic background. And we know from there was a report called The Labyrinth, I think it was called, and we know that there is a link in terms of immigration to this country and people growing up and seeing their parents perhaps from a lower socio-economic background, and there is that link to racial minorities. And then sometimes, it may be the case that you're doing really, really, really well in this country, but you're also sending wealth back home to your family, or you're looking after your parents and your extended family and that kind of thing. So absolutely, sometimes if you are approached for a job, or if you're looking for a job, salary is something that you need to know quite early on. And you're absolutely right. I don't think there should be that kind of micro judgment when somebody asks about the salary.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realise they're doing it. And I'm, I've witnessed really well informed, really, sort of knowledgeable people jump to that conclusion. And I've put myself into that category in terms of, perhaps I'm doing a search. They think, oh, what, why are they asking that? This is a great opportunity. It's an organisation that, is literally shaping society. Like, why is the first question about money? But I think it's subtle, but I do think it's important to be mindful of. And the second one is around flexible working. So again, and particularly as we're sort of post-COVID, where we've gone from one extreme around flexible working, and I think now we're settling down a little bit. Again, if there's a question from someone around, how much can I be at home? Again, it's instantly almost, I think there's a danger, and I'm not saying everyone does this, that the intent behind that is actually, well, I want a role, but I'm actually really focused. I just want to be at home and I want to make my life really easy. And actually,
Yeah.
we all know it's a lot more nuanced than that in terms of why someone might want flexible working. And I think with our clients really questioning the sort of the notion of flexible working and what that looks like and why someone might be requesting that. And it's sort of, to
Yeah.
avoid the default position of, well, and some organisations are better than others, don't get me wrong, and different sectors are very different, it
Yeah.
varies massively.
Mm.
But again, if I think with our clients, if that immediately pops into your head, you might not even say it out loud. It might pop into your head. It might be a thought you have in your head.
Yeah.
Really challenging, why is that my feeling, and what
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
reality of the role?
Yeah, but has that come from my unconscious, and I need to acknowledge it and work through that and actually look into it and think, why did I think that? And then you're absolutely right in regards to the flexibility as well, because I think, sometimes we are, well, our unconscious bias is absolutely fed by our privileges, isn't it? And we all have different types of privilege, and there's so many different types of privileges. But if you've never had to worry about who's picking up the kids and dropping off the kids at school, then perhaps you've never had to worry about having that flexibility. And so I think as well, yeah, it definitely links into that diversity as well. So many people have different responsibilities and different things that they need to consider. And in now in a working culture that we find ourselves in post 2024, agility is really important, that agile working, isn't it? And we all know that we want to fit our lives around our work and fit our work around our lives. And so we should be able to ask those questions. And I think those, although albeit unconscious, those sort of micro judgments are going to, in the long run, potentially harm people that do have those additional considerations, whether it be childcare or family commitments or caring responsibilities or things like that. And what we don't want to do is reduce that talent pool.
Yeah,
So it's really interesting.
yeah. And I think, there's a lady called Professor Claudia Goldin. She won a Nobel Prize last year for economics, and she's studied women in the workforce from the 1900s. And I think when we talk about diversity now, we are often focused on disability, on ethnicity, and other protected characteristics. And I think there's almost the kind of the issue around gender's solved. We've got, particularly in the public sector, I think it's quite good at board level in comparison to the
Yeah.
private sector. But it's only really been in the last sort of 10, 15 years that perhaps that sort of equity in roles in organisations between gender has arisen. But her research basically says, and this is on heterosexual couples, that
Mm.
there isn't the same equality in couples at home. So
Mm.
traditionally, she talks about the concept of a greedy job, and these are at a very senior level. So greedy job, you need to be flexible. You may be travelling. It's long hours, and often in a relationship, actually those gender roles are still quite embedded. The man will take that role. The woman will take a break from the workplace. That
Yeah.
then creates this gap in pay, and I think that's still sort of prevalent. And again, to not sort of think that, well, we're focusing on diversity, therefore it's not around gender. I still think it, have to be mindful of that. And And I suspect, she sort of maps the women into 5 different groups. And one of the biggest changes was in the early 70s around contraception. So women could plan when they had their careers and plan when they have work. As I mentioned, so that the equality in the relationships hasn't quite caught up yet.
Yeah.
But all her changes sort of track with society change. And I think actually COVID meant that, I don't know what you witnessed, but I certainly see it in some of my friendship groups. There is a bit more balance around those
Yeah.
responsibilities, sort of probably sped up by COVID. We
Mm.
see it with candidates before, if someone was an aspirant chief executive, they would move across the country for the right role. And COVID really changed that. And I think that's
Yeah.
wanting to be close to home. Both, again, I'm talking about heterosexual couples being involved around that childcare responsibility. I imagine those requests around flexible working, will be across both genders and in different couples. And I
Yeah.
suppose if you then layer on top intersectionality, so some of these issues, as we know, just become more challenging, the sort of different intersectionalities. So I sort of thought it was quite interesting in not losing sight of that, even if in some ways we think we've kind of fixed the gender problem. I think it's still
Yeah.
there, but it's perhaps just a bit more subtle.
No, completely. Yeah, I agree. And actually, I was also looking at the Show the Salary campaign. Have you seen that?
Mm,
Um, so there's a campaign and it's called Show the Salary. And what they do is they advocate for full salary transparency. But it was just sort of seeing when you were talking about gender, when in certain states of America, the research was actually done when they banned asking for current or previous salary. Um, Pay increase for black candidates went up by 13%, and for women went up by 8%. And that was a Harvard Business Review, like I say, US stats, which actually also then had a further link to reducing pay gaps as well, which adversely still affect women. So, we haven't fully addressed
yeah.
that gender issue at all, have we? But, if we layer it with the intersectionality of the pay gaps for people of colour, and we saw that pay gap for also decrease with people with disabilities and the LGBTQ plus community as well, when there was that full transparency of salary. And that's what the Show the Salary campaign kind of advocates for.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. And I think just, I suppose, conversation like we've had, and I know like work you've done in our organisation, and the sort of advice you give with some of our clients, a lot of our clients around, if you don't have diversity in your board currently or your senior team, I think when people go out to make that diverse appointment, there has to be some work done before that, you as a team or you as a board, around,
yes,
why is that?
yeah,
Intentional or non-intentional, by accident or not, but why is
yeah,
that? What is our understanding? How much do we know? What do we need to change about ourselves first? And also then, what might it be like for someone who then joins a team if they
yeah,
are the only person
yeah,
bringing diversity? And that's a conversation of a time. Just because someone is bringing some diversity doesn't mean to say they are therefore responsible for solely leading the agenda. I
yeah,
think it's very different, and actually understanding what someone is bringing and what it is you need in the team. But
yeah,
that work and that, I suppose, the it's a two-way process. Any appointment is a two-way process, which we know particularly at this senior level. But there is some work required of you as an organisation if there is limited diversity
yeah.
to
Are you ready
date.
for that diversity?
Yeah.
Are your teams ready for that diversity as well? Because we absolutely know that diversity and inclusion, it's not one thing, it's two. There's
Yeah.
two separate entities there, and they mean very different things. And actually, one doesn't work without the other.
Mm,
If you have the diversity but you don't have the inclusion, or you need to work on the inclusion, then the diversity is just going to leave.
mm,
So yeah, and we see that, don't we, through certain experiences of people with those protected characteristics that perhaps go into an organisation. So absolutely, it's about looking within our teams and looking within and thinking, okay, we desperately want the diversity. It's the right thing to do. We know it's going to make us more innovative. We know it's going to produce, increase productivity, and we're going to be better at representing the communities we serve. Absolutely, but are you ready for it? Have we done the work internally?
mm,
Absolutely. And
mm,
that's why, we've got obviously the leadership and talent consultancy here at LTC, and we provide courses like, well, unconscious bias training and inclusive leadership training and inclusive talent management. And we even have governance review that has obviously that inclusivity and that diversity lens to it as well. And I think that sort of internal review as well is just really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, that the process of the appointments we do are very senior. There's, there is the process, and with it, there's a written application often, there's preliminary interviews, there's final panels, the stakeholder groups. There's such a big undertaking for people to go through. But again, at that's earlier start, and I said it's a two-way process recruitment, so it varies sector by sector. So I know it's not, this sort of isn't sort of all applies to everywhere, but candidates will be having informal conversations to begin with, that sort of due diligence. What, where is the organisation? What do you want from this role? What sort of person you're looking for? And I think, again, if you're an organisation looking to make diverse appointments, be really challenging of yourself during those interactions, particularly if, have you done the work around, and it comes with that, sort of very basics around unconscious bias, about unconscious bias, but again, you perhaps as a chief executive might be absolutely clear about what it is you're trying to achieve, but do the rest of your board understand and feel the same way? What experience is that person having, and how are you helping every person you speak to really understand and perform the best, and sharing
bringing everyone along on that journey? Absolutely, it's really, really important.
And I think, for candidates, I would say, if you are new to a sector or new to a type of organisation, really, if we're handling a role, speak to people, let them help you understand how to navigate the process, both formal and informal, and how best you can, I suppose, kind of perform all parts of that process. And I mean, some of that, and this is perhaps more true for non-executive director appointments. So Gates and Sanderson, we've run the Insight programme, which started life in health. Now it works across different sectors. That was in part looking, when organisations, trust, were looking to appoint to more diverse appointments. What we were seeing was you had like really, really sort of interesting candidates, but just didn't necessarily speak the language of the NHS. So, the NHS speaks in 3-letter acronyms. It's got its whole language, takes years to learn. But there's sort of twofold really. So if you were completely new to sector, or indeed completely new to the public sector, if you only worked in the private sector, just really understanding actually how it works was a challenge. Many of the public sector organisations we work with are hundreds of millions of pounds in turnover. The risk is massive. It is people's lives. And I think, so perhaps 5-10 years ago, boards were understandably really risk averse in terms of making appointments, which tended to see, sort of the same types of people be appointed to the roles. And the Insight programme was a way to kind of help sort of break down some of the barriers in terms of how well do people understand the sector, therefore how well could they position themselves and their offer, because unless you've been in it, I think we saw people didn't really know how to sort of position their experience or see why it might be really valuable.
A whole different set of rules of engagement.
And then I think on the other side as well, so for organisations that perhaps we used to talk about scale and complexity. It's always scale and complexity around the experience, and now we talk about scale or complexity because there's value in both. And actually, if an individual hadn't been, a board director of a, large financial institution, then they still could add value in one of those senior NED roles, and helping boards by having people placed with them, actually seeing it, feeling it, experiencing what that challenge might look like and what that input might look like in real life. And I think that, again, kind of dispelled some of the concerns around, we need a non-executive director and they have to have done this. And I think we've seen lots of success with individuals around those who might not have thought about a NED role in the public sector, or organisations who may have spent a lot of time looking for, big experience in terms of turnover, whereas actually you can have complexity in more than just money. So that's been really important in terms of helping some of that change.
And I think it's vitally important, is it, especially across public and not-for-profit sector, because with social responsibility, and that representation is just paramount, isn't it? So uh, those kind of leadership programs like Insight um, are definitely paving the
Mm,
way for a more inclusive society. So it's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. It's been a really, really insightful conversation. Thank you for joining us, everyone, for episode 1 of Leadership Lens. And it's conversations like this that are not only enlighten us, but also propel us forward in our commitment to fostering diversity and inclusion. And we hope that this episode has inspired you as much as it has us. So stay tuned for more enriching discussions in our upcoming episodes. But until then, let's keep the conversation going and continue to drive positive change. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Thank you.